I have 3 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. As people come on, go ahead and introduce yourself in chat. I'm Todd Whitlock. I'm your moderator for today for our final panelist discussion on the future of feedback. I want to thank our panelists. We have Dr. Kelly Andrews, the Executive Director of Doctor's Charter School, Ms. Acey Powell, Middle School Language Arts and Creative Writing Teacher, Dr. Akil Ross, the 2018 NASSP National Principal of the Year and founder of Heart Ed LLC, Dr. David Schuler, Superintendent of High School District 214, the 2018 National Superintendent of the Year and founder of Transeo, Dr. Dianna Whitlock, Vice President of Center for Success and author of Teacher Evaluation as a Growth Process. I also would like to thank our sponsors, Standard for Success and Transeo, as well as the educators that are joining us today, knowing how busy everyone's schedules are with school getting ready to start. We ask that you stay muted until you go into a breakout room. When you go into a breakout room, we ask that you please unmute, turn on your video if your bandwidth will allow, and participate in the discussion in the breakout room. As a former district administrator in charge of technology and curriculum, I find the current state of education, the need for innovation, both exciting and scary. Dr. Schuler pointed out in the last panel discussion we finished last year in crisis learning, not expanded or online learning. Educators did what we needed to do to limp to the finish, while we kept the health and safety of our staffs and students at the forefront of all of our decisions. It's going to end up being close to 6 months since educators and students have had the authentic feedback in the learning and instruction as a general statement. There are exceptions to that statement, as districts had previously implemented and trained for e-learning, but that is an exception. I think of rolling out one-to-one via our Living Textbook initiative that we did in the early 2000s. There was no playbook available. We made things up based on our gut and the limited research that was out there. That's what many of you have been doing the last few months, making things up to get to the end, knowing that you're going to plan, develop baseline data, and implement better at the start of the school year. I hope that we found that we need to do more than just put devices in our students and staff's hands, but we have figured out a way to get access to every student and to train our teachers and our administrators in instruction that's going to look different. Building leadership and district leadership is going to be key as we move forward. We must prepare and be ready to deliver synchronous and asynchronous methods of instruction, or we'll be back in crisis mode as we move forward. Today we're going to be talking to our panelists about their thoughts on best practices of giving feedback to teachers and principal evaluators in this uncertain, ever-changing educational world. More than likely, we are going to end up suspending in-person learning at some time during the school year or have limited in-person instruction taking place. We are facing a teacher shortage, and it is not going to get any better under the current situation. We must be willing to give feedback and coaching to keep educators in the field. Let's get started with Dr. Schuler. Dr. Schuler, thank you for joining us. Today, I know you had an opportunity to give a keynote presentation during AASA's Leadership Symposium. The topic of your discussion there was what skills and dispositions of effective leadership contribute to a culture that supports district level change and innovation during these changing times. We have a number of district office staff on our WebEx today. This upcoming school year may be one of the most challenging years that we as educators face. But I also will say it must be one of the most exciting years, or it can be one of the most exciting years that we face as educators. We have the opportunity to be risk takers in our instructional strategy delivery, in our innovation. What can you share for principal evaluators and teacher evaluators as they look forward to giving feedback in this non-normal looking classroom this year?
Thanks, Todd. And it's a great honor to be on this call with such esteemed panelists. I think from my perspective, the first thing is we have to set the culture, right? And the culture is that we don't want to create a judgmental or anxiety and fear in our principals as leaders or our teacher leaders. We need to think through how we're communicating it from a lens of empathy and constructive feedback, and that it really is about improving the craft. And it's okay to fail forward. Not everything's going to work, and that's totally fine. And from my perspective, I think what teachers and principals want from an evaluator is they want their evaluator to be fully present when they're engaged in that coaching conversation. They want that evaluator to be honest, have competency, right? Be competent, and have the ability to encourage them to do better, right? I mean, I think so oftentimes we focus on the actions of leaders, and my leadership theory, is really grounded in the work of Kouzes and Posner that talk about we focus on what makes a follower want to follow a leader, right? And if we really focus on what followers want in a leader, to the point that we talked about last week, our teachers, our principals want feedback on how they can get better. They don't want generic and generalizations that, oh, that was great, Acey, way to go, And so I think being honest, being able to help people through that continual self-reflection and guide them through that process. And I think more than anything, what I've learned the last 5 to 7 years is how to refine the question I'm asking to ensure it's the right question at the right time of the right person. And I think if you pull those pieces together and you're transparent, and I know I've said it 3 times already in the first 2 minutes, but you've got to be honest with the people you evaluate. You just have to be. They can tell if you're not being genuine and transparent. And so those would be some of my thoughts as far as talking to evaluators. Set the culture. Make sure that people feel free to experiment, because I think that's just going to be so important, right? And then provide them the resource. Ask what kind of resources they need, or ask what kinds of resources they need. And then as an evaluator, go search and find some. Give them some options. Our teachers are under unprecedented levels of stress trying to redesign all of their instruction in a whole new format, knowing that what most did in the spring was not highly effective. And they tell me what teacher or principal doesn't want to do a great job, right? Like, everybody wants to do a good job for our kids. It's our job as evaluators to help them do that in a way that encourages them to dream, iterate, and innovate.
Those are great words. I think it's key that we need to remember that if someone doesn't fail implementing something during these next 3 months, they're not trying something new. They're staying on what's comfortable. So I think I heard you say that today. I heard you say it last week and in other sessions that you've done. We have to be willing to try something outside our norm, outside our comfort zone, to be able to bring the education to the child and to the environment that they're comfortable in, because everybody's scared at this point. Thank you for that. Let's move to Dr. Andrews. Dr. Andrews, thank you for joining us today. And I know that you're completing your tenure there at the Doctor's Charter School and moving over to Indiana State in a leadership role with the Principals Academy. You've done a number of research on principal evaluation, and the growth of principals is a passion of yours. As principals are being asked to go back to becoming the instructional leader, the core of what they got into when they signed up for that role, they are going to be the instructional leader outside of their building, because they're probably not going to be in their building at some time during the year. So as they go through that, what advice could you have for them to give feedback outside of that normal environment as the instructional leader that they are in those environments?
Thanks, Todd, for having me on board again today. It's a pleasure. We talk a lot about what best practices need to be, but really we just need to, create that collaborative culture of trust in order to support our staff. We need to meet virtually with each member and discuss maybe 1 or 2 goals that we want to focus on this year particularly. Keep it simple, keep it small, because we're already feeling a lot of stress going into this new school year. And we need to focus on things in regard to improvement, particularly how it relates to designing those online classes. Regardless of whether they're a superstar or a mediocre or a struggling teacher, we need to really help them focus on just 1 or 2 things. And if a principal then can review online lesson plans and follow that during the observation, and then follow that up with meeting virtually with the staff member to share that evidence garnered through that observation, giving them authentic and specific feedback that's going to really help them to grow. You know, and ask questions. I like Dr. Schuler said, find out what those questions are. Things like, is the evidence connected to the goals? What worked and what needs to be celebrated? Were there challenges? And what would you do differently? And as a principal, what can I do to support you? That goes to the support from central office to principals as well. That all needs to be, you know, implemented, evaluated, assessed, and it just keeps starting over again. So I think, you know, like Dr. Schuler said, and Mr. Whitlock said too, this is an opportunity this year to really experiment and take risks. So I hope that we all will do that this year.
Well, thank you. And we're going to do a little bit different than what we did last week. So we're actually going to go into a breakout room pretty quick, because we've talked about, you know, moving from what we did in the last few months to what we're going to do forward. So one of the things that I want us to think about, let's go into breakout rooms and let's talk about what we've learned the last 4 months and what we can do or what we're going to do to improve it. You know, what have you done the last 4 months to prepare for this week, next month, whenever it is you're starting? Because we have some schools that actually are starting the end of this week that I'm aware of. You know, they can be virtually, but they're starting. We have some that are starting, you know, mid-September. But as you reflect upon the last 4 months, you know, what have you done? What brainstorm as a group? You have a lot of knowledge in these rooms. We're going to go ahead and put you in some rooms. If by chance you don't get assigned a room, I'll do that very shortly. Just kind of, we're going to go for at least 10 minutes in a room so you can have some good discussion. I ask that you accept the room, you unmute when you're in the room, turn your video on if you have that capability, and have good discussion. Ask questions of your peers. We have from teachers to executive directors to superintendents and everybody in between through this, including some consultants and so forth. So ask the experts in the room and bounce ideas off and tell us what you've been doing the last 4 months in preparation for the environment you're getting ready to enter into. So we're going to go ahead and open the rooms.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you.
Hi.
Amanda, and is it Anna?
Anna, yep.
Nice to meet you all. So Anna, start with you. Where are you from and what do you do? And let's just start with short introductions.
Sure. I live in Indianapolis. I am the lead teacher at the Excel Center in the Meadows. So I have a hybrid role where I teach half the day and I am an instructional coach and teacher evaluator the other half of the day.
Okay. Hi, Amanda.
Hi. I'm a high school teacher at Harrison High School in West Lafayette, Indiana. I teach 9th grade English, and I have a dual credit senior class. And I teach speech as well. I've kind of taught every grade level. And I did a virtual classroom this summer teaching virtual speech.
Oh, good. Then you can talk a little bit about what you've learned this summer in a cyber summer class. And
yeah, for
what
sure.
have we learned this summer? What have we learned over the last 4 months that's going to help us move forward?
I found that it was very difficult to get the students to interact while on a Zoom meeting, or I guess we had to use Google Hangouts. It was really hard to get everybody in the same place at the same time, which I would hope would be different, you know, if we're all together during school hours, that maybe, you know, if they're expected to be at home, but I guess during the summer was a little bit different. I had a lot of luck with doing Screencastify videos and then having the presentation mode and then having a video of myself in the corner. That was really beneficial because the students could come back and rewatch it however many times they wanted to. And I used Flipgrid a lot, which was really, really beneficial too, I found.
Okay. What did Flipgrid do for you?
Well, since it was a speech class, I had them put their speeches there so that they could view each other's, and I would put my sample speech there as well. You could, on Flipgrid, you can leave like little emojis, like a reaction, or you could leave a message. So when I would have them review peers' videos, they could go back on it and do that. So for that interaction, it wasn't live interaction, but it worked well as a place to post things.
Do you have pretty good attendance of students showing up every day?
Yes, yeah. I started with 36 in the class, and then 4 dropped, and then I think only a couple from there didn't finish the course, but everybody else did really well.
Okay. Anna, what have you learned through all of the cyber remote distance learning that we've experienced, and particularly as an instructional coach? How are you implementing some assistance?
Yeah, so we were fortunate. So I'm not sure if either of you know really the background of the Excel Center at all, but
I do, yeah.
you do, okay. So we're a school for students that are re-engaging in high school after having discontinued previously. And we do not have an age cap. So we take any as young as 17 and up. I think my oldest student was in their 80s actually one time. So we're an accelerated program. So we run on 8-week terms, and we were actually really fortunate that the shutdown happened like literally right at the end of our term, which made transitioning into doing our first virtual term a little bit easier than it would have been like if we were in the middle. Our biggest hangups were that we didn't have technology to pass out to every student immediately. And even if we did, all of our students didn't have internet. So when we first jumped into virtual, we actually just utilized our credit recovery program, which was not like necessarily the most effective, but it was a way that we could overnight have curriculum that teachers could engage with students in. So we had teachers kind of teaching and explaining that over Zoom, and then students would engage in the assignments and the quizzes through that program.
So what are you going to do differently now that school's starting in August?
Well, we actually are year round, so we've already started.
Oh, okay.
15th, yeah. And so what we've decided to do differently is to try to allow teachers more autonomy to personalize the curriculum for the model. And we've just had so many changes because we started so early, we were actually allowed to start in person. So when we started in person July 13th with a hybrid model where we had some groups of students coming in person and some groups of students engaging virtually, because we're trying to support our students who didn't have the technology to engage virtually to come in the building, and those that did to stay at home. But then the mayor just had the order last week that we had to go back to virtual. So most of my teachers are using Google Classroom.
Okay.
It's a way for, we all have like a Gmail, and students are automatically created a Gmail as part of like our school model. So we have access to it, and it's a really easy way for instructors to kind of like take what they were doing before and upload it to like a common platform. And that seems to have worked really well. Students haven't had too much trouble navigating it once they get in, which is really encouraging because, you know, when we were trying to switch to our credit recovery model, they really struggled with that. And teachers are teaching over Zoom. So kind of providing lessons and then allowing students to do certain assignments independently and do some, and it's been okay. We're just having trouble engaging.
I think that's becoming quite a theme across the nation, the engagement piece. I see we have another person in it's Charity's iPhone. Can you unmute and participate? Tell us who you are and where you are.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
I can, yes.
Okay, good afternoon.
Hi, Charity, tell us who you are and where you are, what do you do and where do you work?
I'm a principal, high school principal for Southfield Public Schools.
I'm sorry, where?
Southfield Public Schools.
Southfield?
Yes.
And what state are you in?
In Michigan.
Michigan. Oh, well, welcome.
Yes.
Welcome. So tell us a little bit about your journey, and then and at the end of this, I would open it up and ask what kind of feedback as teachers and or administrators do you want to start seeing through this process? So Charity, tell us a little bit about your experience.
Our journey was similar to everyone else's. It was very abrupt, but empowering for our teachers. In this time of immediate change, it really forced everyone to come together and utilize their resources. Teachers were helping teachers close that technology gap that had existed for some who were able to navigate and work around that when they had the classroom setting. But when we switched to remote learning, then everyone had to utilize Google Classrooms and move to that particular platform. What we have been doing since the close of the school year, we purchased a learning platform, Schoolology. And we wanted to make sure that our staff was prepared for any future changes that may force us to work remotely, that we would have a uniform system that everyone would be able to navigate, and the transition for our children would be less abrupt.
And do you find Schoolology, the platform, that do you find it working for you before you even launch, and how teachers?
Without applying it with our students, I don't know from that standpoint, but I feel like a kid at Christmas getting a ton of gifts, because there's so many things that it can do. Mm-hmm. And we are so looking forward to having this platform to not only uniform our service that we're providing for our students, but it's going to enhance our communications with our parents, with each other. It's going to allow us to do breakouts. I mean, it's just exciting.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I've been the executive director of a charter school here in Florida, and my principals a couple of years ago instituted Canvas as a learning management system. And the problem was we couldn't get everybody to use it fully on board just because people had different levels of technology. This, like you, Charity, this forced everyone to go into that and really spend time learning it. And we found exactly what you did. Teachers were helping teachers bridge that gap. And I think that's a really important thing that has happened. It's forced us all to look at things a little bit differently. So let's talk a little bit about how do we navigate the field of feedback because obviously everyone is trying.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, how are you?
Kelly, can you unmute?
There we go. So the question is, what does feedback look like when we're not in the classroom? that would go along with folks who are feedback for principals from district office evaluators, feedback to teachers from principals when you're not visiting the classroom. What does that look like?
So I was brainstorming with my team a little bit yesterday, actually, and we were talking about how, you know, being a ghost student on people's Canvas or Google Classroom doesn't seem feasible, or kind of the comment that the gentleman made about principals or evaluators lurking. Yeah, I like that comment. So we were like, okay, we don't want to do that, but as an alternative to observing a Zoom, because also teachers may only be doing a Zoom or a Google Meets, you know, once or twice a week. So instead of just observing live virtual classes, you know, our idea was for a 30-minute stint, give us a tour of your Canvas, give us a tour of your Google Classroom, sort of show us around your classroom, because your virtual classroom is there as well.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I hadn't thought of that one. I like that a lot. I'm going to suggest that to my principals.
I love that idea also. I'm writing it down right now. It's basically you're observing the learning environment, like the classroom. Yeah, so that's
right.
Perfect.
And because, I mean, when I was teaching, I was only doing one Zoom a week, but I was a teacher last year. I'm moving into a different role. And, you know, I'd say 80% of what I was doing instructionally was not live. So we have to find a way to observe that and give feedback on that.
Well, the other thing that's really important is to get people to, both principals and teachers, to post artifacts of evidence of learning, student evidence of learning, units that you're putting together. But the virtual classroom tour is probably the best suggestion I've heard. Thank you for sharing that, Jody.
Sure.
That's pretty awesome. What else can you think of? Charity, you're a high school principal. What are you going to be asking teachers to share with you?
So first of all, having the pre-conference and the post-conference is exactly what we had already planned and had done previously. We wanted to have and fairly give our teachers an opportunity to talk about what it is we're going to see when we join that Zoom session or that Google Classroom. And they, you know, truly appreciated that, which was what many of them said was no different than what we did when we were, you know, in brick and mortar. We would meet prior to talk about what we are going, you know, what we expect to see in the lesson, and then, you know, observe and then provide that immediate feedback, and then meet afterwards to have a one-on-one discussion with them about the learning. So, you know, those things wouldn't change just because we're virtual.
That's fantastic.
We also have data teams, and that didn't change either. The data that you get from the assessments and the work that's done through that whole process is something that, you know, we serve or use as artifacts that learning is occurring, and it gives us a chance to inform what the next steps would be, looking at the evidence from the data teams as well. So we relied heavily on the evidence that was produced from the data.
Looks like we have a leader. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I will apologize because I'm going to be multitasking for a minute, assigning the few people that didn't get assigned rooms to rooms. But if you guys could take a minute and maybe introduce yourself, because I will admit that I didn't read all the chat's introduction. Would greatly appreciate that.
Well, I'm going to be multitasking too, because in a few minutes I have to take my daughter to work, and I've got painters outside, so I've got a lot of stuff going on, and I have a new puppy.
Wow.
I'm a special ed director here in Southfield, Michigan, and we've been using Standards for Success for about 2 years, but we did not do evaluations last year. They were suspended. I'm not sure if you guys were here in Michigan, but in Michigan, we just decided, you know, we had an executive order from our governor. So everybody was just on pause. Whatever you were last year, you were the same this year. So we know that moving forward, we're going to have to increase our level of expectations for our staff.
Jody, you want to jump in?
Sure. Hi. I was a teacher last year, and this year I'm transitioning into a teacher leader role. I'm going to be a PAR consulting teacher. It's a peer assistance and review program. So I will evaluate and mentor all first and second year teachers in our district. And so I think maybe a little bit of the opposite is going on in Illinois. We, I think, are sorry, I'm in a suburb of Chicago. So our district is trying to kind of push towards feedback only and not evaluating as much starting this school year. So we'll see how things shake out, but I'm excited to talk more about feedback.
So I'm an assistant principal outside of Seattle, just right near Seattle. And we've been using SFS, but it was my first year last year. So I'm looking for more strategies on giving feedback. But similar to Lanissa.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Similar to Lanissa, we did suspend evaluations at the end of the year last year, and just everybody received what they had the year before, unless we had kind of completed enough observations before school closure in order to update evaluations. But my biggest challenge was giving feedback to teachers during online remote instruction, like trying to figure out how to give that feedback in a way that was constructive, because sometimes this medium is very hard to read, and certainly the email feedback is challenging as well. So
Sure. So just to give you a little background on myself, I am one of the co-founders and CEO of Stand Up for Success, but also was an educator for 20 years. So one of my roles was in charge of technology and curriculum and those kinds of things. So it is an area that, fortunately for me, we did one-to-one learning in the early 2000s and went through some of the learning curves that people are going through now. On you give kids devices, you give adults devices. How do you actually engage in learning though? How do you assess learning? How do you assess instruction? And one of the things that'd be interesting to hear, and I didn't hear you mention, but knowing that you're probably going to be virtual in some form or blended or something like that. Was there any training done this summer with your teachers on how to move instruction in whether you're in person or you're online?
Yeah, our district was doing like weekly lunch and learn tech talks. So our professional development center has been running a new topic each week. So Zoom is this week. Last week it was Ed Puzzle. The week before that, something else. But they just are kind of picking a new topic each week. But I think it's been difficult because, as you mentioned, the stress put on teachers. A lot of teachers completely shut down more than they would normally during summer, and they haven't returned to working hours yet. So as much as it's been available, I think teachers have needed or have just taken, as is their right, the complete break. And so they're kind of counting on those remote learning days at the beginning. A lot of states, our state gave us 5, institute days, for lack of a better word. So
yeah, that's where we are too, and that we haven't had a chance to do professional development yet at all. Our teachers aren't due back until the end of August, and so due back, right? So we haven't, we've had some offered opportunities, but they really start up in August, and then that's still teacher choice.
Yeah, well, we had ongoing professional learning right when we closed, and most of it was support because a lot of our staff were just overwhelmed. Southfield is right outside of Detroit, and we've been hit harder per capita than Detroit. We have more cases in Southfield. So for that reason, we lost staff, we lost parents, we lost grandparents. So it really hit us tremendously. So our goal was to just make sure people were healthy.
Sure.
So it started out like that. And then I think from that opportunity just to provide that emotional support and let them know we were here, it's almost like they needed to see us. They needed us to let them know that we're still here, we're going to be fine. And it was just what we call sunshine calls that we were making to our parents to make sure they were healthy. And then we started realizing we had to have consistent meetings with everybody. And because I service 12 buildings across our district, that meant I had to meet with my paraprofessionals, my psychologists, all my ancillary staff members, just to do check-ins. But from those weekly check-ins, it became opportunities for training. We realized that they were hungry for training. So we set up a weekly, it was like a coffee talk, and we would give them a new aspect, whether it was a app that they could add on to their Google Classroom. We are now launching some trainings that are going to be optional for our staff. In the beginning, we're not able to pay them, so it's volunteer only, and then we're going to use our professional development days. But we are finding that teachers are right there behind their computers. It's almost like they're hungry to know, are we going back? What are we going to do? They're so nervous about the decision that they're checking their emails, which is something they typically don't do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
In the summer.
Yeah, I think the uncertainty that Dianna and I are both educators, but we also have kids and in-laws, our daughters-in-laws that are in education as well, and they're teachers, and they're like, well, we don't know what we're doing. They happen in one of them happens to be a district where there really hasn't been much communication on the plan, and I know they've been searching for, okay, what can I implement in an early elementary classroom? How can I make sure my special ed students are getting service and getting engagement when they're not with me? In those kinds of things. So it's good to hear that you're doing the coffee talks, if you want to say that, you're exposing them to tools that could possibly use to have interaction with their parents, with their students, to let them see their faces, to let them see that we care about you, but we're also not stopping instruction. We are going to be moving forward with that. And I think that's going to be important for you that are giving feedback to the teachers, is that you can't just stop instruction. You can't just tell me about your day. You have to start weaving in some of the standards and some of the instruction and figure out ways to do that. Sometimes like we're doing now, where you may have a small group of 4 people, or you may have to record something and they may have to watch it that night when they actually have access, because maybe there's four children, or a parent or a grandparent needs the computer during the day for work. They may not be able to log on to be during a live session. So those kinds of things, I think it's important that you guys are exploring those and thinking about those to be able to give them opportunities to interact with their students, but also for you to give feedback and join some of those sessions to give them ideas to try some of the new stuff that's going on out there.
Yeah.
I like what you said, Lanisa, about just the weekly check-ins, because I think something that I noticed was that when I was teaching last year, some of my administrative team was doing that and some wasn't. And you take for granted how much you feel connected to someone just because you kind of share an office space. So my director, who I would normally see every day just walking past, I wasn't seeing him, and we actually asked him to start holding weekly meetings, but it was really helpful. So I'm going to use that kind of moving forward, that as much as I don't like Zoom, an email is just not the same as seeing the human being who you are used to seeing. And, although I don't want to put like more meetings on anyone, I think having a weekly check-in with as many people as possible is a really great idea.
Yeah,
we did that. Yeah, we built that into our schedule last spring when we were off, and it definitely made all the difference to just check in with a grade level. I would be in charge of a few grade levels, and the principal and the coaches would be in charge of other grade levels, and it really worked out well for us. But just being that clear and concise in terms of our communication was the other thing that helped most, is letting teachers know, for me as an assistant principal, I kind of have to listen to the principal and know, okay, what does she want me to be in charge of? And the principal and I are also listening to the district in terms of them saying to us, what do you want the principals at the school level to be in charge of? So then we can say, okay, teachers, now you can be in charge of this, right? And so it seems like just that chain of command just needs to be super clear. And those weekly meetings definitely make a big difference.
I see our time is ticking down. One thing I've started doing is having bi-weekly meetings with our parents, because we realized that they were needing information just as much. And so now that we go
Yeah,
into
good
this
idea.
PD series, we're looking at also how do we teach children to learn virtually? So we're going to offer PD sessions for them.
Good
Thank
idea.
you. Great
Yeah.
conversation. Some great conversations out there in the room that I was in, at least. I know that a lot of discussion on holding some meetings and communication with not just the staff, but with the parents as well, to let them know what was going on, so they knew that we were still there, we still cared about them, and trying to get them engaged in the process. So that was great to hear. It was, I guess, Akil, would you like to share anything out of your group?
I think we had a great conversation about just what you were talking about, and that's your stakeholders. I think as we talk about returning back to school, we put this in the lens of equity. How do we make sure that as we move to this new environment of instruction, that all of our students move along with it? One thing that we recognize COVID did, in addition to changing a lot of the ways we look at our new normals, it has exposed a lot of disparities that exist within our society and inequities. And so we all agreed from a superintendent standpoint, from a director standpoint, and a coach and a principal, that we have to put this in the lens of equity, and having conversations with parents, bringing home kits, so that kids are not just sitting in front of a screen, but having manipulatives. Maybe you may mail a kit to someone or to students so that they can have manipulatives. All of these things with the lens of equity, to make sure that all students have access wherever they are in the community to high levels of learning.
Great points. Dr. Whitlock, do you want to add anything from your group?
Yeah, we had great conversation as well. And one thing I kept hearing over and over is the communication piece. Again, communicating with families, communicating with the teachers' unions, communicating with teachers as they're planning for these either virtual or hybrid or on-site environments, and how essential that is to the process and what things might look like if they're a little different this year. So a lot of good communication going on. We also talked about some schools maybe going back to more of a local assessment, student learning objective type format in lieu of the standardized test if we continue virtual. So those type of things that, again, might be something that we may have to think of down the road.
Sure. And one of the things I know, Dr. Ross, you mentioned about the equitable access for students, but also I'm hearing it in some of the state association conversations, not only for students, but for educators. There are many educators that happen to be in areas where they don't have access to the internet, and trying to be an instructional leader of a building or of a classroom when you have limited access is putting a damper on some of that as well. So not just the students that we have to think about, it's also the adults that may not have the access as well. So we're gonna change gears a little bit here, and we're gonna go to a teacher's perspective and teacher feedback during these times of innovation for our schools. As Dr. Schuler and Dr. Andrews kind of were talking on the feedback and the support for the principals and the evaluators. Let's move to the teacher perspective for a minute, and then get into the feedback to the teachers. And with that, we're going to go to Ms. Powell. And thank you for joining us, Ms. Powell. I know as a millennial, you're comfortable using the technology tools. We found that out in our first planning session, where you were pointing out all the nice features that Zoom had that most of us didn't even know were there. But it's completely using those tools. When you have to use them for instruction versus personal productivity, there's a huge difference. Could you kind of talk about what challenges and successes you had with the group here when you transitioned to having to use the technology for delivering instruction, for assessing student work, and engaging your students and families at the end of last year, moving away from just using it for your own productivity to using it as really an instructional tool?
Hi, hello, and thank you for having me today. Good afternoon, everyone. I didn't hear quite the last part because my computer went in and out. So could you repeat that last part?
Sure. So when can you kind of talk to us a little bit? So Acey just finished her first year of teaching. I need to clarify that as well. So when you went from using all this technology just for your own personal productivity to now having to use it to deliver instruction, to assess student work and engage with your students and families, the challenges and successes that you were able to kind of go through that process last year.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. So some challenges that definitely came right off the bat to me was how to communicate with each and every student and give them feedback in a timely fashion. Me using technology, for example, Instagram, Facebook, I'm able to do that quick because I'm not, giving my peers or my friends feedback. I'm just commenting. When I transition into the teacher role, I now had to realize I can't just give them, what I my friends, oh, that looks nice, good job, great job. I had to be more detailed because even my own students, what I realized is that they wanted to know why. So if I said good job, well, Ms. Powell, why is that a good job? So then I had to be very detailed in my explanation and giving them feedback. So that's one of the challenges that I had to, get accustomed to. And also, one of the things that I enjoyed about the transition was I did graduate from Berry, so I had the luxury of using the instructional tool, Canvas. And so when I went to DCS, Doctor's Charter, that was an easy transition for me because they also use Canvas. But it was very different from the student side and me receiving work, and then now being on the teacher side and receiving over 50, over 100 students work a day and trying to provide that feedback. So that was definitely a challenge. But I also noticed what my students wanted from me, which was timely, honest, and constructive feedback. I had the desire to get that also from my administrator because I love learning. So I also wanted that timely, honest, and constructive feedback as well. So although it's been a challenge, it's also been a joy to get and to learn that process and giving feedback.
So ironically, I had a follow-up question for you that you already answered. Why was it important to get that detailed constructive feedback? But I think you kind of already answered that. And it's great to hear from a teacher's perspective that you really crave that, you want that. And as principals and district administrators, we have to remember that educators as a whole want to get better. They want to please people. They want to please their supervisor. And this just kind of shows that during this time of uncertainty, we want to make sure that we're giving very concrete, detailed, constructive feedback that sometimes may be hard conversations, but they're very important to the development and growth of the educators that we're speaking with. So thank you, Ms. Powell. Let's move to Dr. Ross now. Dr. Ross, I know, as a principal, you're the lead learner in a building. As we talked a little bit with Dr. Andrews earlier, that you're moving from being the lead learner in that building to being outside the building. Maybe you're behind the computer now like we are today. How are you going to be able to stay connected to the pulse of the instruction that's happening from all of your classroom leaders as you move forward in this type of environment? Look forward to hearing your perspective on that.
And I think just to piggyback on what Acey said, she says she loves to learn. And I think as a principal, you have to have that same love for learning. And this time in terms of where Ms. Powell is looking at how am I doing as an instructor with these students, we have to see how am I doing as the lead of instruction for this school. So we got to remember, prior to COVID, you could be in the building, but not at the point of service for instruction, not looking at what was happening in the classrooms. You could be in your office present, but not there helping. And so in a virtual, you're going to do the same thing. You want to be in the classroom, in the virtual setting. I look at 3 phases that you want to be included in: the design of the instruction, the delivery, and then the feedback. And as Ms. Powell said, that's constant. But what was consistent in Dr. Andrews and what Dr. Schuler said is that we established that we have a culture of learning. And so I'm not in here to get you. I'm in here because this is the culture of learning that we're engaged in. And so what specifically would I be looking for this year? Well, in the design phase, I'm going to help the teacher with how we can be flexible. We talked in our breakout groups about, we're looking for waivers away from accountability testing. So now let's let your creativity about meeting the needs, let's let that expand. Let's test some things out. Are we setting clear expectations for our students? And I think we think about materials, but what resources are we making available for our students? And the last point, from the student's point of view, let's look at how they see our instruction. We spoke a lot about equity, and have we had the conversations with the students who are not engaged? How does our grouping work? What does that feedback loop for the students look like? So all of this in this environment, analyzing active learning, how well we're able to empower students to do on their own. I think we should be excited about learning together in this culture of learning.
I think those are great points. And I think the graphic that happens to be on the screen is relevant for students or educators. And it kind of goes to some of the things that you were talking about there. So thank you for giving some concrete examples for us to think about, and definitely remembering as a principal to be involved in the instructional design is a key element with that, especially as they're trying to redesign some of their instructional methods moving forward here with the uncertainty. So that's a key point. Thank you, Dr. Ross. Let's move on to Dr. Whitlock. Dr. Whitlock, we know that you're not going to be in the classroom 45 to 50 minutes, even if it's in virtual setting right now. It's not going to be possible because you're not going to be able to keep people's attention. I mean, we're having trouble keeping people's attention. We're 37 minutes in, and we have different speakers. It's not one person talking. So we know that a teacher is not going to be able to keep kids engaged in a virtual environment for 45 or 50 minutes like you typically would do an evaluation. So what are some ways that principal can still observe and a teacher can still exhibit? It's not only the responsibility of the principal to be seeing it, it's also the responsibility of the teacher to be showing that they're planning, that they're revising instruction based on the assessments that are taking place, that they're meeting the leadership components of those evaluation frameworks that are out there. So what are some ways that the teacher can exhibit and the principal can actually observe in these unique environments that we're going to be entering?
Sure. I first of all want to echo the comments of my fellow panelists and express that I'm really glad to be a part of this group. This has been a great experience, and I've learned a great deal listening to everyone. So thank you all for being here today and all the participants. I think in answer to your question, Todd, that as we move forward with virtual or hybrid instruction, it is important to note that the teachers do have a responsibility in this, a big responsibility in this, and not to put more on our teachers because they're already feeling like their plate is really full. But I think we're going to see in terms of evaluation, we're going to see that teachers are going to need to be responsible for documenting and maybe better use of artifacts to document what's going on in their classroom. Because you're right, there will probably not be an evaluator in there for the extended periods of time that maybe we've seen in the past. There could also be some issues with seeing everything. We know administrators can see the lesson plans online, like they've probably been doing. But when it comes to other things like student engagement, did they have their objective posted? That's going to have to, the teacher's going to need to ensure that they're seeing those things. And I think, again, it goes back to that communication. So the administrator has a virtual pre-conference and they talk with the teacher that, what am I looking for today? What are your objectives? What should I see in this virtual, when I drop in on this virtual lesson that you're doing? What can I be seeing? And then obviously, afterwards do some debriefing with another virtual post conference to say, this was a great example of student engagement. I really like the way you modified this particular lesson. Again, it's that targeted feedback. And just sharing those expectations and continuing that relationship of growth and the mindset of giving strong feedback. I think we've also had the question come up of what about those leadership domains in our rubrics where we have to be leaders and get those type of points. And to kind of echo Dr. Schuler's sentiments, we have an opportunity to have our teachers grow in the leadership domains and document some things for teacher leadership that they may have never thought about before. If I had Acey on my staff, I would definitely have her training other people on how to instruct virtually. I mean, that's a given. But let's remember those teachers that maybe tech isn't their strong suit, and make sure that they are documenting their leadership points and their leadership domains when they do some research on virtual lessons, or they maybe they reach out to Acey and say, could I observe your lesson this afternoon because I really need some help in this area and growing with some of these. And then also we can involve our staff by saying that, we want to do it. I think this is Dr. Ross's area of expertise, but let's encourage our people to do some action research. We're going to have some opportunities here to see what works and what doesn't in this virtual environment like we've never had before. There's research out there on blended learning and virtual instruction, but we really have, again, a great opportunity to encourage our professional teachers and principals, all administrators, to do some research on this and what worked in our school, what's not working so well. And again, I know Dr. Ross is going to speak a little bit more about that later. Quickly from the chat, I noticed a couple of comments and I think they're worth mentioning that we need to stress to our teachers that we're not evaluating their technology skills. We're still looking for those same components of good instruction. And we can get them the support they need, either through a mentorship or through our district tech people or those other relationships that we have, the other support systems. But I think that would be very reassuring to teachers and administrators alike to know that we're not evaluating necessarily your knowledge of Zoom. We're evaluating, are you taking risk? Are you giving your students what they need in a supportive environment? And another good comment came up that we also need to remember that just because we may have one-to-one instruction and have enough devices, that does not mean we're providing effective virtual instruction to students. I know sometimes it's easy to say, well, yeah, we're fine. We have one-to-one. All of our kids take home their devices, but anyone who's taught on a virtual format knows that's just the first step. There's a lot more work and planning to be done to be effective. So those are just a few quick comments that came up that I think are worth sharing. So
yeah, well, thank you for monitoring the chat for that. So one of the things that to remember as well as a principal doing evaluations or assistant principal or lead teacher, during this time, there's going to be times that you're not going to be able to see them live with students because the students may be sharing one device with 4 kids. Or one device with 3 kids and a parent that needs it during the workday to have access. So we're gonna have to be creative in our delivery of instruction, not just in a Zoom format, but in recorded format, and print format, and all kinds of ways to get instruction in the hands of kids. And I think that's gonna be important as well, to be able to look at those artifacts, as you mentioned, to be able to document that they are providing multiple ways to deliver material, not relying on one medium through the process. Thank you. So we're going to take a few minutes here to go into an additional breakout room. And what we want to do is we're going to look at what ways can you give feedback when you're not in the classroom. It'd be interesting to hear because we have teachers on here, we have administrators, we have district office. So just go into your breakout rooms, just share a few ideas. Then we ask that in the chat when you come back, post some of those ideas, and we'll follow up with some of our panelists on commenting on the ideas that are shared. Again, please accept the invitation, unmute, and turn your video on if possible.
Other rooms. So just for your information, I'll go ahead and start the recording. And share a little bit about what you think feedback might look like for your district this year. Do you pronounce your name Leon?
Yeah, Lion. I'm an assistant principal outside of Seattle in a pretty big district, and Highline School District. And you know, I really struggled with feedback last year. Like, we had weekly meetings with each grade level with a coach and, you know, like the teachers on the grade level. And I got to say, it was really challenging to kind of really give that constructive feedback because I wouldn't see the lessons. Like, I could look at them up. You know, we used an app called Seesaw, and like the teachers had Zoom classes or Zoom, you know, kind of class meetings, but they didn't do instruction via Zoom. They did instruction on Seesaw, so they'd record themselves and do it that way. And so it was really hard to, like, you know, to be a student in each of their classrooms and see, because it was asynchronous and the kids were, you know, I was mostly focused on how to engage kids and that the number of kids who come back to their lessons, right? Because we had a lot of kids who just didn't show up or didn't complete assignments at all. And that's, you know, so that was my feedback on sort of like how to get kids to come.
Right.
Rather than on the lesson itself.
Sure. And again, kind of those alternate formats. If they can't get on a computer due to, you know, whatever reason, how can we provide instruction? So yeah, that's very challenging. Very challenging. Rana, how about you? What's your role and what's going on in your district?
I'm a principal at high school, and I'm actually over the Career Center side of it, so all of the careers class. We didn't initially have the ability, and we didn't actually the whole time, have the ability to join in and see our teachers instructing. And kind of the avenue that I took was, I tried to each week do one of three things. Send them a text that acknowledged that I had read their, not say I read it, but in my text to them something specific like, hey, I'd love to learn more about how whatever it was turned out. What was your participation like in your hangout? Tell me what was the funniest thing that happened. So I would ask them direct questions based on what I had read within the boundaries of their lesson. Or I would say, hey, I noticed that you were going to do this last week. One of your colleagues did this, and this is what I learned from them. And I would share that information. And I did a lot of it in text messaging, but I did commit to text message or an email or at least one time sending a physical note to them so that they all got a physical note in the mail.
I love that. I love that consistency. You're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do every week.
Yeah.
I just checked. I literally had a little box. I just checked it off, a few of them every day. I have 30. So we just did a few of them each day.
Yeah.
Kendall, how about you?
So you're on mute.
Yeah. If you're joining us, you're on. We can't hear you. You're on mute. Okay, maybe they weren't able to get in or something.
But I do feel, I wonder, like Diana, you said it, like the feedback on Zoom, like actually looking at someone and talking, it seems to make a big difference to me. Just like, you know, I do miss like seeing people in the hallway and you know, those kind of
relationships,
ad hoc conversations are really missed. And so I think meeting on Zoom is better than email.
I love that idea of using the parent feedback. I think and student feedback. I think that's great. Todd, how about what your members? What are they saying?
I guess I was thinking of Sonia's comment there, just on you know, getting that feedback loop built in.
Yep.
And you know, good teachers do those things within the classroom, exit tickets, those kinds of things, and they. So we have to be careful about creating a culture where some teachers are doing a great job and then those parents are really being critical of those that are not getting that feedback. But I think her point is really well taken around how to design the best classroom listen to the kids. They'll tell us. They're honest, right?
And I'm the director of early childhood for the district.
Awesome, very good. And Alan, where are you representing, and what position do you hold?
Well, I'm representing retirement. I retired in 2014 after 21 years of principal at a high school. And since then, I've helped with the special ed co-op and now the career center. And I'm like a mentor to teachers.
Amen.
And so I'm really interested in the discussion. And I know the teachers at the career center, although they were not trained to be teachers, have the same feelings, the same concerns, and they want to do the best job and that they can for the kids.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, the question at hand is, for the last 4 months, what trainings or processes or preparations have you gone through in preparation for the upcoming year?
I guess I can go first. I have sat on numerous webinars and Zoom calls, and two in particular that were really outstanding. Ken O'Connor, he's an authority on assessment and grading. He had given 2 through, I know the Michigan Assessment Consortium is a group, I don't know if Kate, you're familiar, being from Grand Rapids, if you're aware of MAC, but they focused in on, during a pandemic or during times like we're dealing with, how do we work on assessing students? How do we work on assessing staff? And I just know that those were very, very good. And then I'm also the co-chair for the AASA's early learning cohort. So I've sat on a lot of national calls. In fact, I was just on one today with the Leadership Network and talking a lot about equity. And I think equity plays a portion in assessments of our building administrators as well. I know that, through some of the state level and national level calls I've been a part of, the discussion has turned to potentially filing for the federal waiver. I know the state of Michigan has, again, for the 2021 school year, so they could relax the requirements about accountability for students and for staff, including administration. So I'm hopeful because we're really in a mindset of here, and I know Grand Rapids, I think, just announced they're going virtual for this coming school year. My district has not yet announced. We're hoping to be in a face-to-face environment, in a hybrid environment, but of course, we're never going to make everyone happy. And so we're in a tough spot, right? So I just know from my perspective, really trying to go about this in an equitable fashion is also, it means a great deal to me. Just in fact, today I heard Dr. Louvel Brown, superintendent from Ithaca Schools. He was fantastic, among others, talking about that very issue. So I'll be quiet now and let other people respond.
I certainly appreciate that, especially knowing that the one thing COVID-19 has done, and myriad of other things, but it has exposed inequities. And so to come at reopening from an equity lens, I think as we do this reset, we look for these waivers. And I think, maybe this gives us an opportunity to redesign what accountability looks like, and especially as we move through an equity lens, gives us some hope for the future. Maybe we can not have to go back to the standardization, Kate, so you all are going all virtual. How has preparation for that been?
So right now it's until the first marking period. So just that far is what we've got to plan for at this point. And, who knows what it's going to look like beyond that. But this summer we did full virtual summer school, which I think gave a really nice kind of pilot program for that rather than the, oh no, it's March 13th. What do we do today and tomorrow? So we looked at buying material kits for our students so that they were able to do hands-on, because my role is supporting the pre-K program. So even more hands-on than any other grade I feel is the most necessary there. So looking at material kits, looking at the difference between synchronous and asynchronous learning, and where kind of the right balance feels for that. Because we did hear from some families that, you know, we need more synchronous learning where kids are right there in front of their teachers and that real time. So just now trying to figure out what that's going to look like in a month.
Has there, in terms of trainings or anything like that, or exemplars that you saw from the summer virtual program?
So we learned a lot of teacher to parent training needs to be done on technology is one of the biggest takeaways, that was a hindrance for a lot of families, and it kind of plays into that equity of you just can't access the materials because you don't know the technology. So looking at putting our kind of parent university of now training some of our families in the use of technology before this all gets going, I think is going to be really beneficial.
Very good.
And you know, looking at that synchronous of being able to teach the parents right along of how to support their kids at home was a huge takeaway, that it really became almost a parent education program.
Wow, I agree. Wow. Alan, what are you seeing from your perspective?
Well, I first saw a lot of panic in the career vocational tech teachers because everything is hands-on. And all of a sudden you get to a situation where you did the virtual where, okay, I'll present the lesson, but you know, are you really going to go work on your dad's car? Probably not from a dad's point of view. But I'm very lucky at the center. The administration and the teachers have a great relationship, and have not had to really deal with, yes, you say you're going to be supportive, you want us to take risk, but you're still evaluating, you're still doing this, so we're a little nervous about that. I'm very lucky that they are comfortable in what they do, and they are going to take risk. My role is to observe, to prepare evaluation forms. The director and assistant director actually do the final evaluation. So I work really closely with the administration and the teachers. And I've, through the Indiana Association of School Principals, they've had some good programs. I was a mentor to assistant principals and principals the last 2 years. So I've tried to keep my hand in that. And my biggest thing this year will be, what can I do to encourage the teachers to A, support each other, and B, try some different things.
Mm-hmm. You think that notion of trust comes from that we haven't maybe redesigned the evaluation system? So we're using an old evaluation system for a new model.
I think that's part of it. I have tried over the last few years to really ask those questions. You know, well, did it work as well as you wanted it to work? And if not, why not? What can you do and whatever? But I found that really a key is to get them talking about the lesson, about what they did, and to share that. And all of a sudden, you sort of feel that trust coming, and you can move from there. And if you have a situation where the class is not paying attention at all, maybe there's some parts of that old evaluation system that you really need to kick in a little bit. But for the most part, it's really getting them to think other than, okay, he's in here once, check mark, okay, it's done, let's go from there. It's that constant. And I'm lucky, I can do that. I can touch base with them almost every day. When I was principal, and even the director of the Career Center, there's all sorts of things you have to do. It's sort of hard to get in there and do that kind of thing.
Right. Wow. And I think it goes back to what was said in the larger group about culture. Once that we've established that culture of that we have this trust, and even though I may be the principal or a coach, we can still have these conversations where you are leading more of the talk than I as the coach / evaluator. Very good. I know you have a lot of important decisions to make coming up pretty soon. how do you balance the needs of informing the board and your teachers and the community and your business? There's a lot of different entities that you have to juggle in terms of making decisions for the upcoming year. How do you message all of those?
Well, you know, we're about ready to go back, so I'll be brief. I just know from, we started a school opening task force, invited the entire public to be a part of this voluntary process.
Yeah.
So we have parents and guardians, students, teachers, administration, Board of Ed members, community members, all coming together. We've met, honestly, 22 times virtually. It's about a team member task force, about 60.
Wow.
So we've broken into some subcommittees, and it's been very productive to hear from all of those entities. And of course, we're never going to please everyone. And so even with all of that transparency, we're not going to please everybody.
Amen.
We have to do what we know is going to be safest for our students and for our staff. So
thank you so much. All right, we'll see you back in a bigger group.
Okay.
All right, I think we have everyone back except for, I'm trying to read the name here. It says SFDEA.
Is that me, Monica?
Yeah,
Issa?
I'm
Yes.
sorry.
I'm on my husband's laptop because my Chromebook, the audio and internet was acting
Oh,
up.
that's
So,
okay. I was just
I'm
trying
Monica.
to get the name. Yeah, your name again? And
Monica.
okay, Monica, and where are you from?
I'm from Southfield Public Schools. I'm an elementary principal. Last year was my first year as a principal. 2 years before that, I was an AP. So yeah, last year was fun. But my husband is a principal in the district too. So, and I have a wonderful group of admins that have helped me my first year.
Awesome. Wow. Well, what a first year to write about there. Well, we're basically discussing ways to give feedback to teachers after observations. Any thoughts on that?
I can certainly go. As a superintendent, I've actually jumped on some of those Zoom calls where synchronous learning or face-to-face touch points have happened. And then I just can briefly, either shoot them a quick email after or a text, communicate back to them in a manner just to say, what a great job I think they're doing, or constructive, comments of, did you realize this or did you know that? So that's one way.
Yeah, I've been doing the same, and then also with the asynchronous learning. So the videos that they have posted, being able to go through, watch, and then send an email while I'm watching of picking out all those great things that I'm noticing as I watch, and then maybe giving one, have you thought about or have you noticed? But I found that really built a lot of confidence in them, especially when it was sent out early on.
Very good.
Yeah, and I joined in on a lot because many of my teachers are towards the back end of their career. So this whole digital switch was huge for them. And so just being present and letting them know, I'm not here to evaluate you. I'm here to join you, to provide support. And then it led to follow-up meetings with them virtually, like I try to check in as much as possible to put the human aspect. Southfield really focused a lot on the pastoral care. So I would talk about the things they did instructionally. How did you feel? Did you try using something called Jamboard? It was like a whiteboard, and how did that work? And when they made mistakes, it's okay, because I learned from them, and then having them talk to teachers, we would have small group meetings, what worked, what didn't work, and really provide that support as opposed to, I got you and I'm going to be jumping in. It was really great. And then when our elective teachers joined, they were able to say, okay, let me join your meetings and support you that way. So it was really, really a great chance to connect.
Wow. I think that's just a very interesting point, Monica, that you make about when teachers are able to observe other teachers and give that feedback, that, it comes from all different points here. Ken, we didn't want to leave you out there. You can close us out with Alan, I'm sorry.
Oh, Alan, that me?
Yeah.
No, I've done many of the same things, and it just feels, it feels good doing those things and getting the teachers involved. And I really like that getting the peers involved and helping the other teachers. They like that a lot.
Awesome.
I know we only have 26 seconds, but my daughter is in this, not this group, but is in the thing. She says, we have heard nothing about expectations creating lesson support or encouragement from our principal because super busy preparing things online. Everyone feels lost and unprepared. What can she do? What can the teachers do who want that in a way that, you know, is helpful?
Great. As we bring everybody back together, jumped in a couple different rooms and heard some great conversation. Dr. Schuler, would you mind commenting on some of the conversation in your breakout room?
Oh, we had just, I know you guys last time, the two that reported out said you had great conversations. Ours have just been epic, so take that. But our feedback was pretty awesome. We talked about the need to reach out to students and parents and let them have feedback. Sonia talked about that and ensuring we frame the message with our parents and staff to please provide some grace to our teachers as they're trying, and this is all new to them too. So that was, I think, really interesting to use student and parent feedback to the point that Todd put in the chat a little earlier. A walk by or a walk through looks very different when you're in person versus popping in and out of a Zoom or a Google chat. And that could just look weird and make a teacher feel awkward. And making sure that we focus on the culture in both the framing and the conversation with our staff to ensure that they understand that we're here to support, not to gotcha. And then I thought Michelle offered a really, really great point as we wrapped up. We have to be so intentional with how we encourage staff because this is new for them and they're used to doing the same things for a long time. And so really focusing on that encouragement and support and then providing the constructive feedback instead of starting with the constructive feedback and then trying to build them back up.
Great comments, great comments. Acey, real quick, do you want to share something from your group?
Yes, my group had very awesome conversations and suggestions as well. And when talking about feedback, they suggested that maybe, I'm forgetting, Thomas suggested that on Canvas, they created this new video thingy. And basically what you can do is you can leave a video, a short video. So maybe leaving that feedback and switching it up. It also was suggested maybe leaving a note or an email, like an e-card, maybe to your teacher with that very detailed feedback. So those different things, suggestions I thought were awesome. Being a teacher, I would love that. So I think those things are definitely going to help with being online and just coming up with different ways to give that feedback.
Great, thank you. We're going to move to Dr. Ross. I know earlier it was mentioned that we have an opportunity now to do action research, to actually figure out we're actually doing innovation because we have to, not because we want to. So now we have an opportunity to do some research based on that. And Dr. Ross, I know you've done a lot of research and a lot of speaking on the action research process. Would you like to discuss the action research process and how we can know what is working as we go through this process?
Thanks, Todd. I'd like to kind of pick up where we left off in our breakout group for the main group. And Alan talked about his daughter who's a teacher, and she wrote in basically asking, you know, she's in a situation where she hasn't had a lot of information about how to start the school year. There hasn't been a lot of information and communication about what instructional look like, whether it's virtual or hybrid. And she's worried, and a question to her father, Alan, who's participating today is, well, what should I do? And so this leads right into the answer for any teacher who is feeling in that place is what's called in the literature is improvement science. And it starts with that voice, your voice of that I'm positioned to actually take charge. Right now, this could be really an opportunity to present an idea to the administration. because if they're lost, if they need some help to say, hey, look, this is an idea that I have, and I would like to test it to see if it works. And so that's what improvement side or action research is all about, is saying, we don't know if it works. This is a hypothesis, but we're going to take that chance. We're going to fail forward, as Dr. Schuler says, but we're going to do it in a very constructive way. And so these steps of just saying, hey, I'm going to see what grouping, effective grouping will look like in a virtual environment. You've identified this problem that you have. How do we measure? Are we effectively doing active learning for all of our participants? And then how we're going to do that. So this is part of that design phase. Now you and your administrator, we're talking together before we implement this. What data look like? Are we collecting portfolios from the students, or we're going to look at how they interact, interpreting this data to see who was successful and who wasn't. The biggest part of improvement science is acting on the evidence. Sometimes we can collect data, we can report the data, but moving to the point where we're saying, you know what, I need to switch my practice because the data says that these students weren't engaged. That's kind of when this equity meets action, right? That's where we start to say that I'm changing my practice now because of what the data say. And then that acting on evidence, we go back and reevaluate it. That's that post-conference feedback. So imagine an administrator and a teacher, imagine a coach and a teacher. And as we said in our breakout groups, imagine two teachers giving feedback, observing each other, going through this improvement science matrix format. It allows us to grow in our practice, and I think it elevates the profession of teaching and learning.
I think that's a great point, and it kind of goes in, I think about back in 2011 when many states changed their requirements for reporting and collecting employee evaluation data. And it, unfortunately, is still a compliance exercise in many places. But exactly what you said there is looking at the data and changing your instructional practice based on data. If you're doing this research and actually making changes, then you're going beyond compliance. You're going beyond compliance by saying we have to do online learning, or we have to do this, or we have to get feedback. You're actually giving feedback to the students, to the teachers, and making changes based on the observable data, whether it's assessments to the students or formal or informal feedback to the teachers. And that's how we're going to actually make a difference in instruction. That's how we're going to get away from doing education as we have since the 1800s. It's not the assembly line instruction anymore. We now have an opportunity to expand what we're doing. So thank you for talking about the research and how important it is for us to not only to do it, but to document it and report out on it. So we can share as a collective group to get better. And we can test the research that's being done in South Carolina versus Illinois versus Indiana versus Washington, and pick the best from all of it and take it and put it in our school systems to make our students and our educators successful. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
We want to go to Dr. Andrews to kind of wrap up some takeaways. We've been fortunate enough to spend 2 hours with a number of educators the last couple of weeks, and we have shared as a group our thoughts, and I have learned a lot from the planning process and from the discussions. So we want to give you some takeaways. Dr. Andrews, would you like to summarize a couple of these takeaways that the panelists have come up with to share?
Absolutely. One of the biggest takeaways in all of this is just creating that culture of support. Dr. Schuler talked a little bit about that collaboration and trust that will create those opportunities to take risks that Dr. Whitlock was talking about too. That helps us to grow our practices, and so instruction can be different this time. This also allows for higher levels of engagement. So we're not just looking at the technology, although that's going to be a big part of it this year. We also have to look at that learning design and the artifacts that teachers can feel free to share their evidence, that they can share with each other. At DCS, Acey is really privileged to be in a great English language department that they spend a lot of time collaborating. They work with each other, they share, they go into each other's classrooms, and they spend a lot of time working together about building each other up. So that makes the principal's job so much easier, because then, you know, they already have a team of people. So, you know, providing that support, collaborative, and that culture of positivity, even in the hardest of times, it's going to help us to de-stress, even in a time when we're taking risks and learning together. So allowing everyone to work together and take those risks this year, it's going to be really important. This is an opportunity to be learning leaders leading.
Great, thank you. So we're going to do something. We're going to go off script, and we're going to go probably 2 or 3 minutes over. Feel free to stay. We'll stay on as long as you'd like. But I would like to give our panelists a chance to a 30-second summary that they'd like to share with our group. So we'll start with Dr. Andrews. If you were just on, we'll go ahead and go to you first.
Well, I just want to thank everyone. I learned a few things today that I hadn't even thought about. I love the e-card idea. I think that's going to take off. We're going to share that across the board because that sets a model for giving feedback in a really positive way. But remember too, that authentic and specific feedback needs to be really important because once you're past about the age of 8 years old, good work, good job, it's not specific and it's not authentic enough. We need to be very thoughtful about how we share feedback with our teachers, with our central office, to principals, and so forth. So, you know, I get really excited about thinking about how we can help support and grow our teachers and our leaders.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Andrews. Dr. Ross.
I just, as a follow-up, just to know that through a lens of equity comes the prerequisite of empathy. And I think if we can just keep that notion of empathy from the teacher standpoint, from the parent standpoint, and most important from the student standpoint, what are they thinking? What are they seeing? What are they doing? What are they hearing? And if I can think about those pains that they are thinking, feeling, seeing, and hearing, and then offer now solutions to that, I think we are now on the way to doing effective equity work. And feedback with any environment, but especially in our new normal, this has to be the way forward. So thank you again for allowing me to participate in this amazing discussion.
Thank you. Ms. Powell.
Yes, thank you for having me. And to wrap everything up, I just enjoyed over the last 2 discussions, everybody's perspective and opinions. I really learned a lot, and that's what I love doing, is learning. So my takeaway is just creating that environment and relationship between administrators and teachers, and knowing that they could just learn from each other, and providing timely, honest, and constructive feedback is just going to be critical and will help throughout this whole process, because it will help everybody to get better at their craft. So just having that growth mindset and being willing and open to learning new things and learning from each other.
Thank you. Dr. Whitlock.
Yeah, again, I want to thank everyone for attending, and certainly all of my fellow participants on the panel. It's been a great couple of days of conversation. Just quickly, we've spent a lot of time on virtual instruction because that's our big unknown, but remember, you also have teachers coming on site, and those of you that are opening or planning to open, it's going to be different for them as well. You may need to evaluate them and be prepared for their instruction to look a little different as well this year because of just accommodations they're going to have to make for student safety. So again, we just all need to make sure that we're supporting each other and giving appropriate feedback, and all of us helping each other grow through this process.
Thank you. Dr. Schuler.
I would just say to Eddie's point that he put in the chat, we cannot be too busy as evaluators to give our teachers feedback. That is unacceptable, and that cannot happen. If we want to stay the greatest nation the world has ever seen, it has to happen in our classrooms first. And we need to provide that guidance and that feedback to help our teachers continue to evolve in their work. And I would just wrap by saying, embrace the work, because in embracing the work, we're going to demonstrate impact. And that's what it's all about for our kids. So thanks, everybody. This is exhausting work, but now is no time to be tired, my friends. No time to be tired.
Yep. Well, thank you. As educational leaders, you all are setting the stage for success for the students and teachers by intentionally making feedback and professional growth for yourself and your staff a priority rather than making it easy to pause. You're contributing to a culture where every employee feels valued. That is really important. Thank you for your, thank you to our sponsors and panelists for sharing with us today. Thank you for all those that attended the last two sessions. Your dedication to the next generation of leaders and working towards fostering better teachers and better students that are going to contribute to a better world is essential. If you have additional comments or questions, please reach out to us at the email on the screen, and we will stay on here. Some of us will stay on here if there is additional questions, as long as you'd like. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.